Hello. In this video, we will examine Chapter 1 from Comer and Comer's textbook entitled Psychopathology, Past and Present. What I'd like to do before we get started is just let you know that the terms psychopathology and abnormal psychology are synonymous. So when in our discussion regarding psychopathology or abnormal psychology, we'll start off by just talking about its evolution. And so in the field of psychopathology, what is that? What is the formal definition? Well, it's the scientific study of mental difficulties or disorders, including explanations, causes, progression, symptoms, assessment, diagnosis, and treatment. And the word psychopathology is synonymous for the broad range of mental disorders or symptoms. On this next slide, we are going to look at some of the terminology employed in abnormal psychology. So when we use words like abnormal and mental disorder so often that it becomes easy to forget that there was a time not that long ago when these terms did not exist. So on this slide, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, this is offering the dates listed when these terms and similar words, including some slang terms, made their debut in print. So what are the key features of psychopathology? Those are known as the 4 Ds: deviance, distress, dysfunction, and danger. So while many of these features of psychopathology have been proposed over the years, none has really won total acceptance. So in this photograph right here, you can see, like this woman, like others from her tribe in Burma, this woman is preoccupied with the length of her neck, and she wears heavy stacks of brass rings in order to try to extend the length of her neck. And she is seeking to achieve what her culture teaches her is the perfect neck size. So just keep in mind, in our Western society, the same behavior and goals would break behavioral norms and might well be considered to be pathological. So we'll just talk a little bit about the roles of society and culture. So when we talk about society and culture, there's what's known as societal norms. And the terms norms, that is stated and unstated rules for proper contact that grow from a particular culture. What is normally done in this culture? And a definition of culture would be like the history, values, institutions, habits, skills, technology, and arts that particular culture would be engaged in. So we just need to keep in mind that values and view of what is psychopathology, that changes over time. So continuing our discussion about roles of society and culture, it says here that society selects general standards for defining psychopathology, and clinical practitioners, they apply those standards to particular cases. Now, not all psychologists or psychiatrists, are in agreement. So some of them, like this second person here, Saz, he said that deviations that society call psychopathology are just simply problems in living. But others might feel that psychopathology would be signs of something wrong with the person, that they are engaging in different behavior. So just keep in mind, though, that that powerful impacts of societal norms can sometimes lead clinicians as well as the public to inadvertently minimize or overlook significant psychological problems. And finally, I just want to bring to your attention, just keep in mind, though, that over attention to a society's norms may lead clinicians and the public to confuse what we call eccentricities, which are usually just unusual patterns with which others have no right to interfere. And we usually confuse those with mental disturbances, which are patterns that, might require some intervention. Continuing our discussion about roles of society and culture, we just want to take a minute and talk about cultural differences. That's when a society consists of multiple sub-societies with different norms, histories, and values. So I just want you to keep in mind, though, that the norms of psychological functioning and behavior can vary within a given society, especially in societies that are characterized by people of various races, ethnicities, nationalities, and language. So when we're trying to determine whether a person is displaying psychopathology, it is important that clinicians and the public in general look at the behavior in question through the lens of the individual's cultural norms and values, not just through that of the clinician's own culture, personal outlook, or notions of appropriate functioning. Now, this term here, cultural humility, that's what we're referring to as the importance of scientists and researchers. They must adopt the process of ongoing discovery and self-reflection, in which professionals, they continuously examine their own beliefs and their cultural identities, explore clients' cultures and historical realities that differ from their own. So they need to seek to understand the cultural context of each person's mental health challenges and respond accordingly. Now, as mentioned earlier, we said, psychopathology, usually some of the factors are deviant behavior, distress, dysfunction, or even dangerous behavior. Now, which behaviors fit the criteria for those? So if you feel like pausing the video here and just sort of reflect on that for a moment, we will move on to the next slide. As mentioned earlier, we were talking about people who behave a little bit differently according to the standards of their own particular culture or society. And so sometimes a person, when they engage in different behavior, they might be known as what we call eccentrics. And so some of the characteristics of eccentrics might be just those who exhibit nonconformity or creativity, having strong curiosity or idealism, extreme interests and hobbies, lifelong awareness of being different. They might have high intelligence, they might be outspoken, non-competitive, or unusual eating and living habits. And they might exhibit maybe a disinterest in others' opinions or company, mischievous sense of humor. They don't want to marry. They might be the eldest or only child. And even something as simple as exhibiting poor spelling skills. These are just a few examples here I just thought I'd share with you. So continuing our discussion about eccentrics, well, just not too long ago, you can see according to here, it says just decades ago, elaborate body art on arms and neck would have been considered outrageous and even strange, perhaps even pathological. But today, however, tattoos, even extensive ones, are relatively common. Okay, so what is some types of treatment that an individual might experience? Well, some essential features of all therapy forms. Well, we want to talk about whether they are suffering, whether, there is a person that's helping them to heal. So in this image right here, this person, this woman here, is relieving her stress by smashing bottles in what is called a Brazilian rage room. Okay, and it's very popular there in Brazil. So such popular spaces, they offer people opportunities to kind of vent their anger by safely destroying objects and wreaking havoc. And so some, who use these rage rooms, they may find those sessions to be somewhat therapeutic. But they're not really considered formal therapy. The sessions lack, for example, systematic context with a trained healer. Okay, so let's go to the next slide here. So the person who is experiencing some of the factors that we talked about a little bit earlier, they are known as the sufferer. Okay, but keep in mind that the person who is the clinician that is helping them to heal, They are trained and socially accepted healers. And they basically will prescribe a series of therapeutic contexts between the healer and the sufferer. So despite their differences, most clinicians agree that large numbers of people need therapy of one kind or another. So the sufferer is one who seeks relief from the healer. And the healer is a trained, socially accepted person whose expertise is accepted by the sufferer and their social group. And then that series of contacts between the healer and the sufferer, through which the healer tries to produce certain changes in the sufferer's emotional state, their attitudes and behaviors. So we'll proceed by just talking about the evolution of this branch of psychology. And so how was psychopathology viewed and treated in the past? Well, every society, past and present, has seen people who engage in psychopathic behavior. So as you can see on this slide here, it says many present day ideas and treatments, they have been working, and even though they may have roots in the past. So let's go further here, everybody. So in ancient times, ancient societies, they felt that somebody who engaged in pathological behavior, they had evil spirits within them. So you can see the treatment here. It says trephination and exorcism. So you can see on this skull of this right here, there's 2 holes in the skull recovered, from ancient times. That indicates that the person underwent trephination for the purpose of releasing the evil spirits and maybe curing their mental dysfunctions. They believe that all events around and within them resulted from the actions of magical, sometimes sinister, beings who controlled the world. So in particular, they viewed the human body and the mind as a battleground between external forces of good and evil. Okay, just moving a little bit ahead here, we're going to talk about Greek and Roman views and treatments. As we see here, between 500 before Common Era and to 500 Common Era, philosophers and physicians, they offer different explanations and treatments for disturbed mood and behaviors. So one of them was Hippocrates. Hippocrates believed and taught that illnesses had natural causes in what he called the 4 humors. And just so you know, humors refers to, according to Hippocrates, is things like yellow bile, black bile, blood, and phlegm. So Hippocrates, his focus on internal causes for psychopathology, it was shared by other Greek philosophers like Plato and Aristotle, as well as other influential Greek and Roman physicians. So we can see some of the treatments here, like quiet life, vegetable diet, exercise, celibacy, bleeding, things like that. That's just a few examples of the things that they would treat psychopathic behavior. moving forward here, we'll talk about in the Middle Ages in Europe, demonology, it returned, because they rejected scientific forms of investigation and controlled all education. And I'm referring to the church's practices. So psychopathology increased because people didn't have adequate treatment and help. And they felt, though, that demonic causes, things like mass madness and shared delusions, things like that, demonology and its methods began to lose favor again. So that was it by the end of the Middle Ages. So we could see some of the treatments here were exorcism, torture, and very gradually hospitalization. Now, as this field evolved, some people, like this person, his name was Wire, he believed that the mind was as susceptible to sickness as the body. Okay, so during this time, they felt that, increased scientific knowledge and things like that, basically demonological views of psychopathology continued to decline. But as we can see here on the right-hand side of our screen here, it says asylums, they emerged by the mid-16th century. So by the 19th century, care of people, began to improve. And there were a couple different people, this person in France and this person in England, they advocated for moral treatment that emphasized humane and respectful techniques. So by the end of the 19th century, several factors led to the reversal of the moral treatment movement. Okay, so things like, money and staff shortages, declining recovery rates, overcrowding, emergence of prejudice, they all led to a reversal of this moral treatment movement. By the early years of the 20th century, however, the moral treatment movement had come to a halt. And then long-term hospitalization became common practice once again. Okay, so we're talking about the early 20th century now for psychopathology or abnormal psychology. And there were two different ways of looking at this. We call these dual perspectives. There was what was known as the somatogenic perspective, and that just says that pathological functioning has physical causes. So two of the factors that are responsible for the rebirth of this perspective are, well, physical factors and new biological discovery, things like organic diseases. Okay, so these new biological discoveries were kind of linked to such things as untreated syphilis and general paresis. So the second perspective we'll talk about is what's called psychogenic perspective, and that says that psychopathology has psychological causes. And so that was responsible for a rise in popularity based on work with things like hypnotism. And you can see, Mesmer and Freud, they were parts of this rise in popularity too. So psychoanalysis, by the way, according to Sigmund Freud, that refers to either the theory or the treatment of mental functioning that emphasizes unconscious psychological forces as the cause of psychopathology. So how are these people with severe disturbances cared for? Well, you can see here it says new psychotropic medications in the 1950s were developed. In psychotropic medications, that refers to drugs that mainly affect the brain and reduce many symptoms of mental dysfunction. So things like antipsychotic drugs, antidepressant drugs, and anti-anxiety drugs. All those can cause a change in the functioning of the brain, which results in a change in the functioning of behaviors. And then how were people with less severe disturbances treated? Well, before 1950, almost all outpatient care took the form of private psychotherapy and psychotropic medications. Now, today, outpatient care is the primary mode of treatment because there's more insurance coverage. It's less expensive. It treats a wider variety of problems, types of problems. And then the community health approach emphasizes community care for people with severe psychological disturbances. And there's not too many programs available in that respect these days. Now, just a little bit of statistics here for you. So, over 140, 150,000 people with disturbances such as these, they are unhoused on any given day. And then at least another 500,000 or so are incarcerated. So going forward here, it says, more positive treatment picture for people with moderate psychological disturbances are things like private psychotherapy, outpatient therapy, therapy for people with other disorders, as well as programs that are devoted to specific psychological conditions. So there is a growing emphasis on preventing those disorders and promoting mental health. So things like positive psychology and multicultural psychology, those have been found to be helpful, and we will talk about that on an upcoming slide here. So multicultural psychology, it seeks to understand how the various histories, opportunities, and barriers experienced by people of different races, ethnicities, genders, sexual orientations, disabilities, languages, and other factors affect their behavior, their emotion, and thoughts. Okay, then we can see at the bottom here, it's this term intersectionality. What does that mean? Well, intersectionality just means the cumulative experiences and psychological effects that result when multiple factors, such as race, sexual orientation, gender, discrimination, and poverty, they intersect and interact with each other for any given person. So I just want you to know that often, positive psychology and multicultural psychology, they usually work together. This is a good example in our image here. Two young girls, they come together as one at the end of what is called slavery reconciliation walk by 400 people in the state of Maryland. And this walk was intended to promote racial understanding and to help Americans overcome the lasting psychological effects of slavery. So receiving treatment for individuals who are dealing with these disorders, they may experience a lot of challenges because, they may not be able to acquire insurance, but, managed care programs are very dominant in the United States. And insurance, companies, they usually determine the key care issues. So therapists and clients, typically, they dislike these programs. And I put a lot of reasons here. Feel free to pause the video and look at these on your own time. So what are today's leading theories and professions? Well, talking about the theories here, the various theoretical perspectives are what's known as psychoanalytic, biological, cognitive behavioral, humanistic, existential, sociocultural, as well as developmental psychopathology. So take note here, no single perspective dominates the clinical field. It just depends on each individual clinician and their approach. So things like clinical psychologists, counseling psychologists, educational and school psychologists, mental health counselors, psychiatric nurses, marriage therapists, family therapists, clinical social workers. Well, this is where they fall on a spectrum here. Okay, so as we're going a little bit further here, just bear with me, okay? And so technology, how does that apply these days to mental health care? Well, from the digital perspective, the digital world has new triggers and sources for psychological dysfunction. So things like video games, antisocial behavior development, okay, constant texting, social media posting, tweeting, and internet browsing. that can be responsible for addictive behaviors and shorter attention spans in individuals. Okay, so just thought I'd talk about the positive and negative sides to technology in this regard. So the positive side, says research shows that on average, social media users are particularly likely to maintain close relationships, receive social support, be trusting, and lead active lives. Okay, but on the other hand, on the negative side, research has shown that social media platforms may increase things like peer pressure and social anxieties. So we will be wrapping this up, everyone, but just want you to keep in mind, throughout the past 15 or 20 years or so, online behavior has increased while other key activities have dropped off. So by converting those results from various surveys into scores, uh, researchers have learned that today's teens, they spend fewer hours each day sleeping and socializing in face-to-face interaction than adolescents do. So perhaps not so coincidentally, today's teenagers also have lower levels of happiness. Okay, everybody, this concludes this session here. I hope you found that to be insightful.